everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Balanced Business Dad. I'm your host, Coach Dustin, and happy Tuesday from St. Louis is where we're coming from you today. And guys, real quick, I want to tell you about this book that you've heard us talk about a couple different times, but it's called The Comfort Crisis. And RJ has mentioned it a couple times on the show, but one of the quotes I heard today, and I'm going to butcher it, but I thought it was so profound, is it was talking about fear. And it was talking about fear is the emotion that's actually leading up to the event of whatever it is. It's not necessarily during the event, but it's leading up to the event. And I thought, wow, that was pretty cool, because there's been things that, we've been worried about or fearful of. And then when we push through, it ends up being okay. So I thought that was a really good quote, but I highly recommend that book. But today, I want to introduce you guys to someone that's really important in my life, and I don't know how much he realizes that, but the pastor of my church that I go to, a spiritual leader, and to me, my family. There's also a school associated with the church, so even my kids. So I'm super excited to welcome to the show today, Pastor Ryan Taylor. How are you, sir?
I'm doing really great. It's a beautiful
Awesome.
Tuesday so far.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird days again where it's been cold in the morning. It's supposed to get hot in the afternoon. So I'm wearing a sweater this morning, and then I'll probably take it off by the time it gets up to 70 again. So
I know. Gotta love the Midwest, right?
yeah.
So, it seems, so my best friend, and I might have said this on the show before, as his dad was also a pastor of the church I went to. So I've kind of seen the family life of a pastor. And even though I don't think a lot of people would consider it an entrepreneurial world, I believe that it really is, because you are dealing with a lot.
People who don't think it's entrepreneurial are crazy. It is.
Exactly.
It is so much the same. There's so much overlap that happens between the business world and being a pastor.
Yes.
We're just dealing with souls rather than dealing with KPIs. I think that's what you call them, the key performance indicators.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes. So true. So true. Yeah. That's what I wanted to have you on the show, because you obviously are a pastor, which to me there's so many overlaps there, but you fit the Balanced Business Dad so well. And we've had lunch and talked about this before, but we focus on obviously faith as our first pillar, then our health, then our marriage, then being a father, then being a friend, and then our business or job, whatever it may be. And I thought, because I've seen the roles of a pastor in a very close setting, and man, you guys do a lot. So I just wanted to have you on the show so you can talk about how you balance it, for lack of a better word, and just kind of your story. So, Pastor, how did you even get into this? How did you become a pastor? So
it's not something I ever thought. I grew up in a small farming community, about 900 people. I grew up on a farm my whole life. Both my grandpas were farmers and taught me work ethic, just how to get up in the morning and start getting to work. And went to a small school. I only graduated with about, I think, 25 people in my class. Tiny school.
wow.
And I figured that was it. You grow up in Oakland, Illinois, you're there, and that's kind of the small town life. And but then my sister had met a boyfriend who was going to school up in Wisconsin called Concordia University in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And I went up and visited, and I said, you know what, maybe I'll head off to school. And so I went off to college. Been musically gifted my whole life. Thought that was it. I was going to be a music teacher. I wanted to instill the love of music into kids. Oh man, music stuff. I failed out of the program. Failed, done. The program. My mentor was like, "This is not for you," and I was like, "You are correct. It is not." So I didn't know what to do. So I mulled that around for a while, and I went to theology because I enjoy reading God's Word. And it wasn't until the summer of I graduated college, and it wasn't until that summer a really great mentor of mine poured into me so much, and just a really wise person who said, you can go back home and you can do the farm thing. You got an education. It's great. Good for you. Or you can continue on this and head off into pastoral ministry. And most pastors will tell you that the first time someone says that to you, it's like, no, that's not happening. I'm serious. you're going to tell me to go to 4 more years of school after I just got out of 4 years of school and head off and learn some stuff. And then who knows where God's going to put me after that. But I always continue to look at my life as a way in which God has taken care of me in my life every step of the way. And a lot of days I forget that. And I just need to be reminded each and every day that each step that I've walked has been God purposely pulling me through. And because after that year, that summer, I needed a place to live. I worked at a camp. That's where I met my wife, Becky. I was not planning on that at all, but God was. And then I went off to the seminary and headed off to another small town in northeast Nebraska for 5 years to be a pastor. And then God called me back here to St. Charles. My wife is from Perry County, and we got 2 kids. And I've been here for now, I'm in my 5th year here at Emmanuel, and it's been incredible. And I want to change it for the world. Anything that I do for the world, no amount of money or no amount of praise, I would never change anything for that, because it's one of the most worthwhile things I could ever see myself doing. Yeah. Now I know that about what you said earlier. Thank you for that, by the way. That blew me away. I was like, let them that.
Yeah. So what I love is hearing that story is that what you just finished up with is I wouldn't change it for the world. And, but I also want to really hone in on the fact that as a pastor, you are truly have the struggles of an everyday man. And I think sometimes if you don't know the pastor that well, or the person who's leading your church, you see them literally up on the altar, if you will,
yeah, they become
and you don't know that they have, and you don't know that they have the challenges of the other business dads out there, with the challenges in their marriage or being a father, because as we've talked so many times, being a parent is hard, but also the social life of their friends, because I believe you have to have that community. So. And I've seen, at the drop of a hat, a pastor get a call, hey, we need you at the hospital, so that means I have to leave my family. Now, we're in a bigger church now. Where I grew up, there was one pastor, and that was it for the whole congregation.
Yeah.
How do you guys handle that, where you're making sure that obviously the faith part's taken care of, but also you as the man, and the health and the marriage and being a friend and a father?
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
It's one of those things that I run a lot with under this mantra of there are busy weeks and there's not busy weeks. There are crazy times and there is times when things are just kind of going. Sometimes as a pastor, you don't know when those weeks are coming and when those weeks aren't coming. And so it's been really important for me in my life to make sure that I have that really healthy balance of that understanding and having the trust in because I do, as much as an entrepreneur I am, I do work for the congregation and the people who are here.
Right.
And so I have to have the trust in my congregation to know that, hey, it's okay that pastor is taking that time off today to go do something else because of the week that it's been. One of the things that's always been helpful to me, and I don't know if this is helpful or not, is I section my day like into 3 days. I mean, in 3 parts. There's a morning, there's an afternoon, and there's an evening part of my day. And if the church can have 2 of them, that's fine. You can have the morning, you can have the evening, but I need some time. And so it might be that afternoon time that I'm off. It might be that morning time that I'm off. It might be that evening time that I'm off. But I need that intentional break in my day, because it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's not. Right. And if I don't balance my day that way, I'm quickly working 12, 15-hour days some days just because I forgot. And it's easy to do, especially during the busy times. And so it's important for me to be like, hey, what am I doing? What does my week look like? Where are my really busy points in my week? And if I got some busy points in that week, where are the times that I'm taking off? And I have to intentionally do that. Otherwise, it just gets out of control real quick. And that's where you hear the horror stories from pastors being like, oh, dad never was home, and mom's, was mad at dad because he never came home at nighttime, and he's not doing his part of the job. And I'm like, see how that quickly gets out of control. Yeah.
So I love that. It's all about the intentionality. I have something on my monitor and it says set the intention, right? I want to set the intention
Yeah.
for everything I'm doing, and it's kind of what you said there is planning the week. So you plan the work, right, where you're not so dedicated to the work, so you have the family life. But are you planning up
Hmm.
other parts like the time, the purposeful time with your spouse, the purposeful time with your kids? Even without
Oh
them,
yeah.
to have the
All that.
social life away from your family, is that
Yeah.
all encompassed in there? Or
All that's encompassed in there. It
okay,
has to be. Those intentional times, for health reasons, those kind of things. Um, you know, um, for time with my spouse, getting away with her, and making sure those things are happening. You gotta. I live and die by by my planner these days. I used to not be a
yeah,
planner guy. I was just like, I hate
oh,
it. I don't do that. Sit down and plan things. Come on. And then I realized, you know what? That's probably the most helpful tool in my arsenal right now, because it's like I can look at my whole week and be like, oh yeah, that's got to go, or that can wait, or
yeah.
just to be more intentional. So many times we just fly by the seat of our pants and think we're just going to live life, and it's like, well, that's fine, but if we're not intentional, you're going to burn out quick,
Mm,
because
so
you're not
true.
going to find time for things. So
Yeah, so true, right? If it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist. I've lived by that mantra for a long time. That I
100%.
heard that in a class once. Yeah. So that's awesome. One of the things that we talk about at the Balance Business Dad is there's never what I'm going to say true balance, right? I can't have everything in all six
Yeah,
pillars
you can't.
equal. But one of the things we focus on, and I would love to hear your feedback on it, is when it's talking about being balanced, it's talking about being present in the pillar that you're in, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm with God, when I want to spend time with God, when I'm at church, I don't want to worry about the other things. I don't want to worry about work. I don't want to worry about that, disciplining my kids on the way to church, which it happens.
Right.
I want to be focused as much as I can at church. Therefore, when I'm working on my health, when I'm at the gym, when I'm working out, I want to be present there. When I'm with my wife, the same thing. And that's kind of what it means to us. So we can have it all, if you will,
Hmm.
obviously with the help of God. And the only way we're getting it is with the help of God.
Right.
But would love to hear your feedback on that and what you think about being present in the times.
And this right here is the worst thing that was
Hmm.
ever invented. I
That was the
mean,
cell phone for the people who can't see that.
it's terrible. Yeah, for people who can't
It
see, it's cell
is.
phones. Man, I do a lot of, because I work with kids over here at the school, so I also do a lot of reading about health of kids. And one of the things that I've taken away from a lot of parenting books I've read and parenting classes I've read is how true it is to be like, when you put something in front of yourself, it doesn't have to be your phone, it could be anything. And your kids are right there, or your spouse is there, or church is there, or whatever it is. You put something else right there in front of them. What you're saying is, this thing is way more important than you.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, what you're saying is, I'm way more important than you are. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing, and and I'm going to do what my agenda's been set up with before I ever attend to anything else. And so you have to check yourself, like especially at nighttime when I come home, because it's, man, if I had a busy day, Dustin, it's like I get home and I'm gonna sit on the couch and I'm just gonna look at my phone because I'm tired, and I get those endorphins in my head. They're like, oh, it feels real
Yeah.
good. This feels real good. And then my kids come up to me, and what I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this in your life or anybody else has noticed this, is that when I get interrupted in that, I get angry. I get
Yes.
mad because you've just interrupted what I'm doing. How dare you?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it's important for us to check ourselves and be fully present in that moment of whatever we're doing, so that they can have the attention. And then when something comes up, we don't want to get angry because someone interrupted something that I want to do. But wait, weren't you setting this time aside for that purpose, right?
Mm.
And people just,
Mm.
we don't do that. I mean, it's a tough society we live in, that's just so driven by ourselves, but we're not supposed to be. And like you said, we can't be completely balanced in that, but when we're there, you got to be there. I mean,
Yeah.
especially with your spouse, it's just, especially as a pastor, or even with other entrepreneurs or people who are running their own businesses. Man, it's like you get home and your spouse is there, and this is the love of your life, the person that you've been committed to, and they understand. Don't they understand that you've been busy all day? They get it, but they've been busy all day too. And what they need from you in that moment is for you to be present with them and see them and validate what they've been doing all day, you know, and then hopefully they'll validate you afterwards in a healthy, good relationship. But that's so important. It's so important just to be present.
Yeah.
And I love that about, you know, being in that for that, because I've done it the opposite way in my life. When I first became a pastor, I was like, I'm gonna change the world, and you burn out pretty quick, and your family gets pretty mad, and your health goes to crap, and it's just not a great thing. So.
Yeah. And thank you for being so transparent with that. I love that. You know, as a pastor, you, besides leading the church, there's also a lot of counseling and talking to people and things like that. Especially with the, I would assume, and I don't know, but in the marriages and people struggling with that.
Yeah.
I would love for you to touch base on, or even as a parent, either way you want to go with it or both, what are the common things you're seeing and what is getting the people through the other side when they're coming to you, especially about those two topics?
Marriage in our day and age, what is tearing people apart, and people don't like to hear this, is, how do I put this in a way that's easy, is the busyness of not only the life you're living, but also the busyness of the life your kids are living. I can't tell you how many times parents come in who are married and they're having marriage problems because they don't see each other ever. And when they get together, they're not solving problems within their marriages. What they're doing is that they're trying to, just kind of two ships. I guess the old phrase is two ships passing in the night, because this guy got to drive this kid here, got to drive this kid here, and there's never time for one another. And I always tell them, I said, well, the biggest issue you guys are having is not the fact that you guys lack intimacy or you guys lack that connection. It's the fact that you guys aren't together. You guys are living two separate lives. You can't do that. You guys have been committed to one another, and that's when people grow apart. Is when we've suddenly, God has called us to cleave to our wife, and when we're suddenly saying we're not going to do that anymore, and we forcefully pull away because of good things. I'm not saying that some of these things are bad, but you're not making those intentional moments to be there, and a lot of it does kind of boil down to how busy we've made our lives and filled our lives up with. One thing that I see from guys, and guys don't like to hear this too much, is that a lot of guys are still boys when they get married and they never grow up.
So true.
And so they ask questions like, well, my wife's role to do that. I said, no, you gotta help, dude. You have to be, and it's not like, hey, I'm going to wait around for my wife to get ticked off at me and tell me to do that. No, you see it and you do it. And that's being present. Mm-hmm. And if you're not present in the house to do those things, you're not going to see those things. And so no wonder it's like, the trash is overflowing and you walk out the door quickly again because you're late to something. And then you get home and your wife's like walking and huffing and you're like, what are you so mad about? And she's like, the trash. I'm like, oh, I'll take that out. And she goes, it's not the fact that I told you to take it out. It's the fact that it was overflowing this morning and I wanted you to see it and I wanted you to take it out. Those are some big issues that people deal with when they're just not present for their marriages, and that's what I deal with a whole lot of. And then it's just like, guys, oh, I can go on, man. Guys want to, guys want to relax at the end of the day, and there's nothing wrong with relaxing. But if you haven't been present for your wife, I don't think you get the privilege to do that. And so when I hear wives saying, well, all he does is play video games all day. Well, it's fine to maybe play video games for a half hour or an hour, but like, what were you doing before that? Oh, you walked in the door, put your stuff away, and turned on the Xbox. I don't think that's helping your marriage, dude. And so it's a lot of this ideas of guys just refusing to grow up. I mean, for myself, even, my mom babied me. I'm the youngest in my family, and she did so much for me. And then I got married, and then I'm still doing the stupid stuff, and I'm just replacing I say this sometimes to guys, I'm like, you have replaced your mom with your wife. How does that make you feel? And they're like, oh, I have. You're absolutely right. I'm like, yeah. You're expecting her to pick your clothes up off the floor. and put your dishes away and all that kind of stuff. And you can't do that, guys. You got to grow up. You got to take charge of your family. Otherwise, it's not going to be a great thing. Yeah.
Man, I
So
love that. And one of the
I'm
things
sorry, I got to
you
rant.
started with, no, and which I love. This is perfect. Absolutely perfect. One of the things that we talked about is, it's because we're so busy with the children. And that's why at the Balanced Business Dad, the pillars are in order of faith, health, marriage first before the children. And I've seen two of my best friends have went through a divorce. And what I saw there is they weren't focused on the marriage. And that is something, my wife and I were very purposeful about it. We'll do trips with the kids and then vacations on our own. And, one of the things that we struggle with that we're actually working through is the time, because we work together. We're business partners too. It's to have time of not just working when the kids aren't around, not just talking about whatever we're working on. So we're purposeful about it, and we schedule that time. Yeah. There is time in the calendar every week, even if it's just us going for a walk, right? And that has been a tremendous difference. We got that from, who Dr. Gary Chapman is, the author of the 5 Love Languages. Yep. He also wrote another book called Now You're Speaking My Language. Phenomenal. We just finished it. It talked about creating the intimacy in the marriage, but not, everybody thinks of just sexual intimacy, but all of the intimacies, right? Yeah. And so I would highly recommend that book, but that's awesome. So from the pastor side of things and the parent side of things, because we want to be the spiritual leader in our household, and bringing our kids to church is very important. But I struggle with this while you're preaching. It's my kids are over there and I'm like, I want to pay attention, but they're acting up. And, so it's like, what would your advice be?
I'm going to tell you this right now. Your job right now as a parent isn't to listen to my sermon.
Okay, I'm gonna point that out.
Your job, if you get something away from it, that's great. Your job right now is the fact that you brought those. You brought Raya, you brought Brody. It's Raya, right? Yeah. You brought them to. You brought them there. Good job. And sometimes parents can just get their kids to the parking lot before they start melting down. I'm like, oh, good, you got them to the parking lot. Next time, try to get them in church. It's the habits that you're building. It's you got a long-term process going on. Your kids aren't going to be with you forever. And so there's going to be time, and your kids are going to get older. And there's going to be time when it's like, okay, I can intensely listen to the message today. But, my wife, man, my wife's a single parent every time she goes to church because I'm working. And she always comes, sometimes she'll come home and she'll say things like, I got nothing out of church today. I'm like, but your kids did. And we also know the promises of God that say that when we're there, stuff happens. So I don't know what happened for you there, but it was good for you to be there. And so that's what I try to encourage parents with sometimes is like, man, my kids are just going to throw a fit and they're going to go all over the place for there. I'm like, well, come for a little bit. If you got to leave, you got to leave. But the important thing is you're creating faith habits that are saying what we're going to on Sunday morning is important. And it's so important that I'm going to take you even when you don't want to go. And, that's just the way it is.
Well, thank you for that. I needed to hear that. So I'm going to assume a lot of our listeners needed to hear that too. So,
I might get in trouble for that I just said about like, it's not your job. I get it. As a parent, I absolutely 100% understand how crazy it is to bring your kids to church. It's, it can be just a struggle because it's a struggle to get them up and them in the clothes and then out the door and on time. And if you got stuff going on afterwards, which I know people do, it's like, okay, now we got to time this thing to make sure that we're out of church. And oh man, this pastor's preaching. I know that guy preached for like 30 minutes. And so it's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't go. And you're making the excuses before out the door. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Something else I would like to, and just because I saw it firsthand with my best friend is because you mentioned, obviously you're a parent and a husband, is at our church I saw it, and my best friend mentioned it a lot, the scrutiny he was under as being the pastor's son. Or to me, the hardest working person in a small church is the pastor's wife. Probably in a big church too, at least there's a little bit more support. So how do you guys navigate those waters? And I know our kids one of our kids is the same age. So I know what's going on. There's so much growing up right now at first grade. So Do they have that at the larger church like ours, or is that more of the smaller church kind of thing?
Man, our church is a beautiful church, and the people here have been so supportive that we don't really see a lot of that right now. A couple weeks ago, my son won't. If he listens to this in 10 years, he might say something like, "Dad, you shouldn't have said that." But Becky went to the 5 o'clock service. I had something else going on, so we couldn't go to church together that night. Sometimes we try to go to church together if I'm not working, but a lot of times it just doesn't work out. And so he's 4, and he's just having a 4-year-old meltdown in the back of the church, like loud, so loud that one of the ushers texts me and says, "Hey, Pastor Ryan, I just wanted you to know that your son's being really loud at church today, so that you know whenever he gets home, you can talk to him about it," which I appreciated. I was like, "That's awesome. Thank you for doing that."
Right.
Because it was going to happen anyways because of my wife, but and then I guess the usher went up to my son and said, "Hey, I texted your dad about what's going on here." And that caused him to have a bigger meltdown because he didn't want to go home. But it's just kind of that that's the thing about Emmanuel, is that the people know my kids, but they also know who I am, and they know the kind of dad I am, and they recognize that, yeah, the pastor kid may be not having a good time back there today, but he's going to hear about it when he gets home, and his dad is going to make sure that he knows that how we respect mom in church, and how we respect church, and I made him. The other pastor was preaching that day. I made my son come to school the next day. His office is right next to mine, and go to him and apologize and say, "Hey, I'm sorry for how loud I was in church the other day. That's not how I'm supposed to act," and so that expectation is there regardless if they're my kids or not. I mean, they're pastor kids or not, and that's the way they should be. But we don't get put under the microscope like other churches can. And I know those stories are out there, the scrutiny that can be there, the expectations of the way that you're supposed to act as a pastor's kid. And I'm hoping, at least, I don't act like a pastor. I don't know if he knows that, Dustin. I'm hoping for that reason that my kids are like, well, we don't really have to act like traditional pastor's kids in that sense as well. So, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So we're coming up to time, but what is the one piece of advice that you would give a balanced business dad?
You have time. You have it. I know people talk around here like we don't have time. We got to get to the next thing. You do. I promise you do. You just aren't thinking about it in the way that you need to. God has, God, one of my favorite Bible verses ever in the Bible. I say I got a lot of favorite Bible verses, but this is probably in this season of my life has probably been the one that I've held on to the most. It's Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and he's saying, "Hey, look at the flowers of the field, and look at the birds of the air. Do they tarry or worry about what's going to happen? God has clothed them more beautiful than anything, and he takes care of them, and he's going to take care of you." And then he goes on to say, "Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow's got enough worries in itself. You take care of today. You worry about where you're at now." And that's what I try to live my life by so much is, what can I do now with the people I'm in the room with and I'm present with today, or for myself, that can make a difference today? And if I make a difference in my life today, then that's going to have carryover for tomorrow.
Awesome. That was beautiful. Not expecting that. And that was beautiful. I love that.
I
love that. I love that. So, Pastor Ryan, thank you so much for being on the show. Guys, I hope you got as much out of this as I did. And if not, you should go back and listen to it and start taking notes, because it was packed with some wisdom there. So I love that. Thank you so much. Guys, remember to dad up, because the people who love you the most deserve it. Until next time, we'll see you next week. And remember, you can join our free Facebook group at The Balanced Business Dad, or go to dadupgroup.com. Join us there. Join the discussion of over 400 guys just doing life together. So until then, we'll see you then. Make sure you dad up. Thank you, Pastor.
No problem.